the Know Your Gear podcast. The Know Your Gear podcast is brought to you by Patreon members, channel members, and viewers who like and subscribe. Thank you for making this possible.
Hey everybody, how's it going? A little crossover there. I hope everybody is having a good time. Before we get started, I want to let you know this is the last weekend to get Moonpie shirts. We're doing a limited run of these until August 11th. So if you guys are interested in getting any of the Moonpie guitars, and if you guys don't know what is a Moonpie guitar, I'll put a link right now to this timestamp that will take you to the Moonpie guitar story, which I hope you guys enjoy. It's definitely something that's been a big part of our life. So I'm going to jump into a couple of the first ones. From Matthew says, hey, I bought a cheap guitar to leave at my son's place when I visit. I bought a Squier Strat at his local guitar center for $270. It plays insanely well. Felt like it was a steal. Really impressed by the Squier. Yeah, well, I mean, Squiers are great. What's funny is, I have a video from a long time ago talking about the Squier that I had, and I had it for years and years and years. And I really liked it. And, it was just a really good quality guitar. And I really think Squier and Epiphone make really good guitars. That's not a question. I don't know why my hat's all messed up. But I just don't see the value in Epiphone and Squier and the lower price points anymore, other than the brand having the customer's back. Obviously is a bigger brand. You can buy something from Sweetwater Guitar Center or your mom and pop shop and feel like you could, walk back in with your Squier and Epiphone and say, hey, I'm having an issue. And there's a huge history of a dealer and a manufacturer relationship. And of course, I think you'll be covered versus the fly-by-night company, on Amazon or, whatever flavor of the week's on the YouTube channels as a guitar builder. However, I just cannot get over how good these inexpensive guitars are. I can't wait to show you. As you know, I asked Gabe, the CEO of Guitar Center, about what he thought about these guitars, and he referred to them as toys, the import, Amazon, guitars. He didn't specifically name them. Obviously, he just had generalized that. Of course, when I think of this, I think of it like the E-Arts, the Fireflies, the Monoprice, whatever, all those brands. I actually talked to the CEO of Sweetwater, which that podcast will come out soon, Mike Clem, and I asked him the same question, and he gave a much different answer than Gabe. But either way, in my opinion, which is my opinion at both times, I don't think either one see what I'm seeing. And when I say that, I don't mean like in an intelligence level or in an education level or anything like that, or intuitive in the industry level. I'm just like, look, there's a lot, it's like, I'm taking these guitars apart and I'm seeing something I don't think they're seeing, which is they have learned, they meaning the collective mind of the people who are buying them from China and Indonesia and selling them to us. They've watched the YouTube channels. They took the notes. I don't mean my channel. I mean, there's a lot of channels. There's lots and lots of channels that are looking at guitars differently, because if you think about the first days of YouTube, it was really about show and tell. It was like, hey, a new guitar day. That's why new guitar day doesn't really work for a lot of channels. It used to be you could put new guitar day in your title and you would get a lot of views, because a lot of guitar players would be like, whoa, what did you get? And you were very curious. What did I buy? Why did I buy it? And what's my experience with it? And it was very, very exciting. And that's why I watch them too. And then sadly enough, I believe New Guitar Day got corrupted when New Guitar Day just means this company sent this guitar to me to show it to you guys. And now everybody's in on the fact that the YouTube channels are not presenting to you their experience of their guitar. Like, hey, I got a guitar and let me share that experience with you. They're sharing hey, this company really wants you to see this guitar, so I'm presenting it to you. And that really, I think, killed it for me. And the point I'm making here is that's why I think it had to change from, look at this, I'm having a good time, which is an honest kind of way of looking at it, to, okay, if I'm actually presenting this just to you now, then I need to present something to you that has value, like maybe go over the quality and the details and the specifications and kind of give you a presentation, right? And so it goes from show and tell, in my opinion, of just look what I got and how much fun I'm having, to now this is just like, you're in front of the class, instead of showing them what you brought today, you're now presenting your report, right? And that's kind of how I look at it now. Now I'm presenting more of a report to you guys than I am a show and tell. I think the smaller, as in every industry, the small businesses, they figure it out first because they're hungrier, they're a little bit more desperate, maybe they're a little quick to change. They're looking at it and going, okay, these guys really seem to be focused on the presentation. In other words, again, I'm giving a report. Look at the boxes I'm checking. Like, this is a quality piece of wood. This is a quality piece of material for the nut. These are locking keys. These are the right frets. This is what's going on. And I think, honestly, Sweetwater Guitar Center, they're all not catching on. And I think Fender and Epiphone are Squier Epiphone, and they're not catching on because what they're doing is they're still running the same game, which is, hey, do you want a Fender, but you can't afford one? Well, this looks like what you want, doesn't it? It's really damn close, isn't it? It's really close. Like, let's say you want a Gibson Les Paul Standard. That's your dream guitar, and it's $3,000, $2,500, and it's just not a practical purchase for you. And you're like, I'm going to find an Epiphone, and you go, you're like, I'm going to get an Epiphone, and now you're like, Epiphone, $1,300. You're like, what the hell? This isn't the price point you thought. Here's $699, $649 for a Firebird. Those prices are crazy, $700, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm looking for something like, hey, I watched this YouTube guy, and he's showing me a great guitar for $200. You're like, okay, so, and what do I get from Epiphone for $200? Oh, I get, this doesn't look, you pull this up and you go, well, this is a Les Paul Special. This isn't even a Les Paul. For $200, I don't even get something that looks like the actual Les Paul. Now maybe here, Epiphone, here's Studio, $269. And now you're finally getting some Les Paul, but black finish, very uninspired. Bolt-on neck. You're like, bolt-on neck? And here's the irony. This right there. This is the thing I'm going to show you. Made in China. And so you're like, wait a minute. So I'm looking at a guitar from a guy on YouTube or a couple YouTubers. And here's a guitar that has a set neck. It looks exactly like the Gibson. It has binding like the Gibson. And it has, nice pickups like the Gibson and nice tuning keys and all these features. It's made in China. And you're like, okay, so I'll go to the real brand for alternative, and it's like, wow, for the same price, I get a lot less. And I'm sure that's always been the case when it comes to brand names and off-brand names, but isn't that the whole point of Squier and Epiphone, to be the off-brand? Isn't it supposed to be the affordable version of the Gibson Les Paul and the Fender Strat? So that's my long tirade to say that basically, I think it'll be interesting to see how this goes, especially since, and I feel like this whole question set me on a tirade, but this is a thought I've been having, and I actually had this discussion at Sweetwater again. I just think it's going to be interesting in 10 years when the used stores are full of these really high-quality used guitars. That's my argument now is, what's going to happen to Epiphone and Squier? Like, is that going to be enough for someone who's 10 years old today when they're 20 years old? And they're like, okay, I went in the music store and they were trying to sell me this $499 Affinity and it played okay, but they had a $99 thing called a Firefly and it was like perfect, right? It'll be interesting. But yes, but the good news is, to your original question is, you can get a great Squier, you can get a great Epiphone. Like I said, it just makes me think of that every time. And that's why I said I'm curious to see what you guys think about Mike Clem's responses to that question. Mistress 3840 says, going to pick up a Carmel Harley Benton tribute Keith Richards from the Tech today. I put Northern Lights in the bridge and a Seymour Duncan broadcaster pickup. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Harley Benton is a perfect example. I think that is an interesting thing because you look at Tolman and that's why I asked. I was very strategic. He didn't get it. Gabe didn't understand it when I asked it. I asked him about those guitars because of Tolman embracing the Harley Benton. Tolman is, think about this. I know a lot of the guys that are selling you these guitars, these E-Arts, these Fireflies, all these brands. I meet them. These aren't companies. Okay, there isn't like an artist relation. It's not like how like I don't talk. Like, let me put it this way: Paul Reed Smith doesn't call me and go, "Hey Phil, I really like to promote the new Herman Lee. What do you think?" Like, I talk to the marketing person. The marketing person reaches out, and they usually have a boss. So there's I'm talking to the employee of marketing, and then there's a boss, their boss, and then of course there's lines of bosses ahead of them, and then there's Paul, right? So I'm not talking to Paul Reed Smith about his new SE line or his new guitar. I'm not talking to the CEO of these big companies, when they reach out. And I just realized that like a lot of those companies don't reach out. I was going to say Fender and Gibson, but they don't talk to me. So anyways, my point is that on the smaller builds, you're just talking to the people, the owners, right? They're doing it all. They're handling they got to market it, they got to sell it, they got to get it delivered, they got all the stuff. And I thought it was interesting because these guys are small, all of them that I'm talking to. So they pull in a half a container of guitars, or maybe if they're lucky, they can pull in a full container of guitars. It's a very big expense to them. They're really betting their lives on it a lot when they start out, hoping that they can get a YouTuber to show you guys this guitar and then get it sold. And then, of course, make sure that the factory did a good enough job, so that you're not returning half the supply. And Harley Benton, because it's Tolman, they have so much buying power. They can just do what those guys can't even think of doing when it comes to buying. And so could Sweetwater and so could Guitar Center. So they could easily be in this. When I mentioned it last time, somebody mentioned Mitchell at Guitar Center. Mitchell's a joke compared to the Harley Benton guitars. And if you have a Mitchell and right now you're like, what? He called my guitar a joke. Look, a Mitchell is as good as a Squier and an Epiphone and any of the entry-level price guitars that you can get. And so if you like it, I've worked on them. There's nothing wrong with them. But the Harley Bentons are a step up, just like those Fireflies and those E-Arts and stuff. They're a step up in quality because they're definitely trying to sell you on the quality aspect. I'm not saying they're great, perfect guitars. There's no such thing. But I'm just saying they are a step above. So yeah, I think the Harley Benton is interesting. And I think interesting. I have a theory, and one day we'll talk about it. But unfortunately not today because I can't even do it until I get the interview with Mike Clem out. I have a theory why Guitar Center and Sweetwater don't go down the Harley Benton route because they're obviously neither one of them are interested in creating their own Harley Benton line. And then Christian's question, thank you, Unfreaking Believable, says cheap versus expensive Pacificas, deep dives of an expensive model. Yeah, we mentioned that. I'll see. The big thing right now is I'm traveling. Okay. And so the traveling is not something that can be planned in the way that probably people plan like a vacation, right? Like, hey, let's go this month and go on vacation. What happened was it took 2 years minimum. And isn't that funny? It's like John Mayer took 2 years to make the Silver Sky. Everybody takes 2 years to do something, but it did take 2.5 years. It started in 2023. The communication with June at Cortec to get to see the Cortec factory. I wanted to see the largest high quality factory in the world. That has been a goal of mine for so long. You have no idea to go into a factory that's large, but also known for making some of the best guitars in the world. And here is why. And so, this is part of the reason why it took so long. It took so long because it took 2 years because there's hundreds of brands basically in that building. So they have NDA. So obviously they don't want you filming. That's who's in there. Okay. Even though we all know who's in there. But also keep in mind, there are prototypes. This is the thing you guys don't think about. There are guitars being built. In fact, for a fact, I can tell you what's going to happen. First, almost everything I'm going to be in the PRS building because PRS has its own building at Cortec. I'm spending an entire day just in that building. That's one day for that building. Those videos won't come out until at least October. I've already talked to the people at PRS who, by the way, they're flying out Jack Higginbotham, the CEO of PRS, to meet me there, just like June is flying out from Korea to meet me there, so that June can spend the day with me on the second day. The guitars so if you get excited and you're like, oh, when he gets back from Indonesia, can't wait to see what he says and shows. Well, keep in mind, I've already been told that almost everything I'm going to see, I can't even put out content or talk about till October because you're like, right, because think about this. It's August, right? So August, September, October, 3 months out, they'll have delivery of the guitars they're building right now. So there's guitars. So see how hard it is? I'm like not only looking at brands that don't want you to see that you're making guitars, but they're guitars that aren't out for the public yet. So that's a big issue. So there's a lot of issues there. So the reason I'm pointing that out is what happened was that got planned finally for the first week in August. And then Sweetwater reached out and said, hey, we would like you to sit down with Mike Clem, the CEO of Sweetwater. We saw the interview basically with Gabe at Guitar Center. And we thought, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to have a perspective of the two, because like I said, between those two CEOs, they run about 50% of the guitar market in the US. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say no. That doesn't sound smart. So I'm like, yeah. The problem is I can't do it until after I get back, in August. And so they're like, well, can we do it in July? I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go in July. So that's what I say. So the travel thing messes up some of the content that gets on the channel. So I got to put out some of the content. So that's my long way of saying I just don't know if I can get to that kind of video anytime before the end of the year. It's going to be tough. Just can I tell you for a fun thing just to go to for a second. So the trip to Indonesia, I was looking at the itinerary because I'm getting my stuff prepared. So I fly out of Phoenix. So Phoenix to LA, which is like a 40, 50 minute flight. It's not that long. Maybe it's an hour. Then I have an 8-hour layover at LAX. I was like, so I sit there for 8 hours. Then I fly from LA to Hong Kong, and I have a 6.5 to 7 hour layover in Hong Kong. And the flight, I guess the flight from LAX to Hong Kong is 13 hours. Maybe it's 17 hours. I can't remember. It's some nuts number. And then how it works is then I fly from Hong Kong to Indonesia. I forget what city I fly into, but I know this. When I get there, once I get through and I gotta get a visa and pay the for the visa and all that stuff. Once I get through the airport, then I'm being transported to the hotel, which they said is about an hour and a half away. And then I'll get to the hotel, and then I'll be there at like 5-6 o'clock at night their time. And so then I'll go to the hotel. I'll be able to rest. And then the next morning we get up and then we go to the factory, which is like an hour and a half drive to the factory, which isn't a big deal. And then the way back, the same thing. So it's like, so that's why I was saying I'll be physically traveling twice as long as I'll be physically in the factory or physically there. That's just, so you know how this works. By the way, that's how the Indiana trip to Sweetwater was. I was physically traveling longer than I was physically there doing the work. I spent more time in the airports and on the planes. That's how it works a lot. So yeah, it's a little brutal. This one is from Christopher, who says, hey, I found myself wanting a USA Ovation lately, perhaps something a little older, but the brand seems to have fallen out of favor. Are there genuine problems with Ovations as they aged, or is it just a case of preference shifting? It seems like guitarists love to hate them. Ovation was huge, the 70s. It just became the guitar to have. Huge. And then, of course, the 80s, it really became this iconic rock ballad type of view guitar. I mean, that's the way I kind of take it is, when you think of Ovation, you think of rock ballads. It became the standard guitar you saw in MTV videos for all of the metal bands that did the ballad. And I think that's where the stigma got, but I think the biggest problem with Ovation is the same thing that happened to a lot of companies that did something interesting and innovative. Pickup companies are a perfect example of that, where the entire guitar culture shifts and goes, oh, the only good stuff came from the 60s, the 50s, and then maybe the 70s if you're lucky, maybe. And it's like, oh, and in acoustic world, that's not even, so that's actually accurate for electric guitars. Acoustic world is like everything that's good on acoustic came, from basically Martin and Gibson. And that's kind of where we've centered back to, right? So there was a time where guitar players, obviously in the late 70s, 80s, were definitely like thinner acoustics, more comfortable. Why not? You're just plugging them in anyways. Think about this. It's the Ovation is a perfect example of the crowd isn't going to hear the actual guitar. They only hear what's the guitar's plugged into because you're on this giant stage, right? And if you're going to play a stadium, that's the Ovation. That's a thin body acoustic. Who cares? And then I think now you have, just like I think they fell out of favor the way a Marshall stack has fell out of favor, a giant stack of amps. Everybody's like, hey, maybe a more realistic, well, that's even a huge amp, this one I'm pointing at, but just a more practical 112 cabinet amp. Maybe a PAF style pickup, maybe an older guitar. I mean, it's really just funny how we started innovating all this stuff and then we stopped and said, you know what? I think we had it all right at the beginning and I think we're done and we're gonna go back. So that's the thing with Ovation. But if you want it, you should get it. The fact that it's in favor, out of favor shouldn't matter to you at all. I think, and so I didn't read the question wrong. I didn't read that you're concerned that people will, make fun of you or not, you're not getting something that's cool. I think that your real question is there a quality issue with them? No. I've repaired a few Ovations over the years, and The only repairs, I mean, I've had a cracked top one, but that happens in any guitar. I had two where the bowls popped off, and that was the same thing. Somebody hit them really hard, and the bowl flexed just enough, and the corner of a top popped off, and we had to re-glue it and fix it. Pretty durable. I was never a fan of them because they slide off my leg, and you have to have that little rubber thing there. So that's kind of like the only thing I didn't love about them. But standing with them, I think they're really comfortable and great. And I think they look cool. So I'd say if you want it, get it. There's no issues that I think you should worry about. Brian says, hey, on an Fender American Professional 2 Telecaster Deluxe HH version, is it possible to swap out the 3-barrel bridge to the 6-saddle bridge? I'd have to look at it. Let's take a look at it. The answer is yes, because somebody makes a component that fits that retro style 6-saddle. So what your problem is, you don't have 6 individual holes on the back of the bridge. So the bridge needs to be swapped out. Now, is there an aftermarket company that makes something? They might. I don't know what you think the advantage of is getting 6 individual saddles. If it's an intonation thing, first of all, this should be able to intonate fine with these adjustments they made to the brass pieces. But even if not, you can always replace these ones with more ones that are more compensated for intonation purposes. If it's just the aesthetics you don't like, that's a different thing. But like I said, I would go with just changing out the bridge. Somebody makes an aftermarket bridge, it'll probably fit in there. That's my guess. This is one of those things, like how it would happen with me is somebody would come in and ask me that, as a repairer, and I would take the guitar in, and then I would do the research online and go, okay, let me look for a retro bridge and see what we can do. Something like this, I haven't done that particular bridge. That's not a very common bridge to swap out, but my guess is somebody does make an aftermarket saddle that will get what you desire. But I would also say don't worry about the 6 individual saddles on the bridge versus the 3. There's a lot of discussion about the intonation issues with 3 saddle bridges, but keep in mind a lot of that discussion is on the original 3 saddle bridges that were fixed and didn't adjust. Now they really know how to calibrate them. And I say that for one reason only. And when you go to Nashville and you go into the studios, the guys who are playing the music that are just, where intonation is just all they care about, they obsess about it. To say is an understatement. They still use 3 saddle bridge guitars. So, I mean, obviously they can intonate them just as well too. And I've never had a problem intonating most of those guitars. Jimmy Four Thumb says, hey, have you noticed the difference between PRS USA made pickups and the foreign made S versions, thinking of the 5815S in particular? Yeah, the difference to me is the import versions are darker sounding. There's not as much high frequency in them. And that's the major difference. My PRS S2 single cut semi-hollow now has 5708s in it. So I swapped those pickups, which I thought were much brighter than the 8515s. That one had 8515Ss, right? The 5815Ss, I think, are a little better than the 8515Ss to my ears when I say by high-end frequency, if that's what you're after. Keep in mind, I don't have a problem with the guitar being, those pickups being too dark or bad. I wanted to try it. I think I like them better, but to be honest with you, I think they're slightly better than the 8518Ss that were in the guitar. And even part of me was like, well, I can go back and swap them and I can just sell these. To me, honest, I was like, it's a little better and they're already in the guitar. I'm gonna leave it alone. So I guess that's my way of saying that that's what's in my guitar now, but I don't want to allude that like they're so much better than the original pickups that were in the S2. I just thought, I did the whole like, hey, I wonder if I put some high quality, PRS USA pickups in this guitar, it's going to sound better. And I did. And, it's fine. Like, there's nothing I can think of. One thing I guess I could say is I think the bridge and the neck pickup are more balanced now, where the neck pickup was really warm and bassy and the bridge pickup was a little brighter. Now they're more equalized. So it's not as dramatic when I switch from neck to bridge pickup, which is cool, but not so much that I noticed or had a problem with it. So anyway, it says, hey, Phil, I'm interested in a super distortion pickup. You have a video talking about it, and you said that you would put it on a guitar, but I didn't find the video of the guitar. Do you still like it? I like the super distortion. I also think I also think it sounds really good in the bridge of a Les Paul. I think it's a really good guitar. It just depends if you like, if you want to kick the front teeth out of your amp. That's what the super distortion does. That's what it's good at. So what's great about a pickup like that is sometimes you have an amp and you're like, man, it's just almost there. It's got just almost enough gain, but there's nothing left on that knob. You can juice up a pickup. Now you can use a booster pedal too, but I think getting it from the source is always a little better. When somebody says, like this pickup's spacey, well, then you can just adjust the controls of your amp. You can adjust the controls of your amp. You can get an EQ pedal. You can get a boost pedal. However, everything is better with from the source. Does it make sense? If you have to, as you start manipulating the sound as it goes, I found that you don't get the best version of that sound. Does it make sense? And that's not super important, but it's nice. So like I said, I'd rather have a hotter pickup. If I'm trying to juice the amp, I'd rather have a hotter pickup than a boost pedal, but I know that's not always possible, so I just use a boost pedal. Okay, Dan, the guitar man, says, hey, any issues leaving guitars stored in gig bags in a closet? I do it. I live in Southern California, so humidity in the climate controlled. I also use 9s. That doesn't, excuse me, the coffee. That doesn't matter. I also leave most of my guitars in gig bags. I leave them vertical, so the butt on the ground, in the closet, in rows. It's fine. I've had no issues with it. My only thing I tell you guys when it comes with gig bags or cases is what I found is it's probably a good idea every couple months to open them up and check the guitars and, go through them and put them back. That's all. So, problems move slow. So necks, bowing, back bowing, laminate, laminate meaning things glued, coming off. Things move slow. So if you open up a gig bag or a case and you're like, oh my God, what happened to this guitar? Trust me, it happened over a long period of time. And it's because you weren't paying attention to it. So every couple months is enough. I've never seen anything where somebody's like, I stored this 2 months in my closet and now it's like, look at this. And I'm like, it's not really going to happen that way. And that's also the same thing with fret sprout and stuff. So if you're like, oh, you pick it up, you're like, oh, it's sprouted a little bit. You usually don't get fret sprout within 2-3 days. If you notice all the guitars that I get on the channel and I check the frets for fret sprout, notice I'm like, I've had it for a month. Minimum 2 weeks. I try to keep all the guitars for a minimum 2 weeks. So, because I find it takes at least 2 weeks for fret sprout to happen, if it's going to happen here in Arizona. And that's a minimum. So same thing. So, and why that matters is if you're getting a little fret sprout, instead of having to correct it, if you get it when you first get it, sometimes it's really nice to just maybe put a humidifier with the guitar and see if that fixes it, since it's at the beginning of its journey to suck. All right. Okay. He says, hey, I saw on Ed Roman guitar that I can't get out of my head. Any experience with their builds? This would be the Pagan model. The body shape is gorgeous. My experience with Ed Roman is not great. Shauna's experience with Ed Roman is much worse. So Shauna got actually in a heated argument once with Ed Roman. Isn't that funny? It was really funny. So Ed, God rest his soul, who passed away. The Ed Roman story goes like this. Everybody, if you haven't heard of Ed Roman, first of all, you can go to edromanguitars.com and read rants. Go to the rants thing. That'll tell you. Some of them are great, some of them not so great. He used to have a hard-on for hating Paul Reed Smith in the funnest way, I think. A lot of people have a different way of hating Paul Reed Smith now, but he used to have a different way of hating him. And used to fight. He was notoriously known through the rumor mill of doing counterfeiting guitars and doing weird stuff. So he's got a lot of drama when it comes to that. Now, again, these are the rumor mills. So I, as always, which is why I like to stick to my own experiences, tell you my experience instead of a rumor or what people say or what the industry, whatever. My experience with that Roman was, and a rep comes in our store and they are representing Baker Guitars, which is now owned by Ed Roman, which if you don't know anything about Baker Guitars, they are very PRS. They were Baker Guitars were built in California and very, very prestigious, very high-end guitars. I didn't have PRS in the store. We had Fender, we had Schecter, we had Washburn, we had some brands, but we didn't have like a Gibson or a PRS or anything like that yet. So Baker seemed like a great way to go. It's a unique brand. And so he showed me not the prototype, but the cell sample. I looked at it. I think it was like I had to buy 6 guitars, which is great for a small dealer because like 6 guitars to buy in is not a huge buy-in. And I said, let's do it. He left with the order. I asked a lot of serious questions, and then I mentioned to Shauna, I said, they said these are made in USA in Ed Roman's shop. She's like, yeah. And I go, I think it's made in Korea. She goes, why? And I told her, I go, it's hard to explain, but you can almost sense where a guitar is built by just the way the finish feels and the way it looks. And just you get used to who does what, how. I said, this just screams world manufacturing or the Mir factory. It's just high quality, almost to the argument. I could almost argue that the Korean manufacturers, some people have said, and they say this about PRS guitars all the time. They go, oh, they have no soul or sterile, whatever. And some people say that to me, like Korean guitars just feel like plastic and they're sterile. I think it's because they're too good. They make the guitars really, really, really well. And you make a guitar too well, it just doesn't have as much personality. And so it's like, it's really good, like too good. So here's why the story's funny. The person from Ed Roman's store calls the store to get the bill paid. This is, I don't know if it's days later or weeks later, probably days. And Shauna's like, okay, what's the bill? And they go, yeah. And she's like, okay. And she's like, and I just want to verify these are made in USA. And they said, yeah. And she goes, and you can show me proof of that? And they said, well, hold on, we'll call you back. So Ed Roman called Shauna back and he starts yelling at her. Right? I kind of feel like I should find her and because she's somewhere here, and get her to explain the story. Because I don't remember because I only heard the end of it. I heard the end of the call. She's basically, they didn't start yelling at each other, but let's just say it didn't end well. Okay, hold on a second. I think I can get Shauna and we can clear this up. Give me a second. Okay, so real quickly, I'm asking her, all right, so tell them what happened when the people at Ed Roman's called for payment on Baker guitars, because I don't kind of remember it entirely.
They gave me a call. They wanted the payment before they shipped. And then when I asked them, so let me make sure before I pay this, these are USA made guitars. And he wouldn't answer me. He just kept asking me for the payment. I just got a vibe that something wasn't right. And so I just kept pushing, where are these guitars made again? And then he said, well, let me call you back. I got the call back. It was actually Ed Roman, and Ed Roman was irritated with me for even questioning where the guitars were made. And through a few minutes of going back and forth, he admitted to me that they were finished in the USA. My question to him is, well, what are you finishing? Aren't they a set neck it's complete.
Right, it's a set neck guitar.
And he got very angry with me, and the call did not end well, and we did not buy the guitars.
Right. So when they said finished, I remember they said they're finished in the US, and we're like, what does that mean? And that's when they're like, well, it means we get Korean made necks and bodies, which of course came already glued together, and we add American bridges, tuning keys, and pickups. And I thought I remembered they said they could refinish some of the guitars. I don't, but that was an extra charge. And that was the other thing that was weird. Now that I'm remembering it, it was one price, but then it was a couple $100 more if we wanted Seymour Duncan all this other stuff in it. Otherwise, they were putting Ed Roman pickups in it or something. I just remember the whole thing was weird. So yeah, so it was an interesting experience with the Baker guitars for sure. And Ed Roman, of course, was basically what people kind of described him as.
It was a little gruff.
It was a little gruff. Thank you. We'll move on We'll move on. I heard not great things about his the history of his legacy in his store, but in my experience, we didn't order those guitars in the end result because, and they did past that, did try to imply those guitars are all made in the USA, but later it did come to a fruition or out that they were essentially Schecter guitars, that they were swapping all the components and doing setups here in the US. That's the story I can tell you, because at least it gives you a reference of the person. And my general instinct is if Shauna doesn't want to work with somebody, I kind of take that as a sign to not work with them. Because I would argue, silly enough, Shauna will tell you that when it comes to business acumen, I have a better business acumen than her. However, my business acumen is corrupted with my passion, which happens, which is why, so like when it's not guitar stuff, I almost come across like a smart person. in business. Like I can really make some decisions that have been very, very fruitful. And you know, she's been very, very happy with all of my decisions. But when it comes to guitar, I make a lot of decisions sometimes based on like, well, I really want one and I think it's cool, or I think it's cool. and where she always kind of has the compass, you know, right? She can look at it without that passion for the love of the guitar kind of vibe. And she's like, no. You're not looking at this right. This one, you're paying attention to the amp or the guitar or the pedal. You're not paying attention to the actual business of it. So yeah. So that's why I trust her with that kind of stuff. Because I was just excited. Oh, and I should also point out, these were freaking expensive guitars. This wasn't like, wow, American guitars for $800. These were $200 less than a Paul Reed Smith. So, you know, $200 less for an American-made PRS at the time, but you were going to get a Korean-made guitar with American components on it. And that's why I think the Baker line failed. You can still find them, and now it's hard for me because when you see it, it's really hard because there's some actual old-school USA ones and then the import ones. And because they're not marked, some people fall for it. I see it all the time on Craigslist. Some guys I was asking like $2,000 for essentially a Schecter guitar. He just doesn't know that it's, you know, that it's essentially a Schecter with a Baker logo on it. All right, we're going to do something fun.
Now it's time for Guitar of the Week.
Know your gear ain't just for geeks, so here's the Guitar of the Week.
You guys know I just had a birthday, okay? And that was my excuse. That's all you need. You need an excuse. Birthday, holiday, Monday. You need excuses to buy a guitar. I use those 3 days. Birthdays, holidays, and Mondays. If it's any one of those 3 days, you can buy a guitar, as far as I'm concerned. Which makes it really tough when you want to buy a guitar on a Friday. So anyways, I went to Sweetwater. I did a bunch of videos. And while we're there, I told the story that Shauna and Madison is the person in marketing who we call him a handler. That's probably not the best way to explain what they do. When I go to places like Sweetwater or factories, like when I go to Indonesia and where I was, there's usually a person who's with me all day. What's great is they're there to let me do whatever I want to do, but also make sure I don't do anything crazy. They're also there to make sure that I take a break and get some lunch, or if I need a coffee or water or something. That's why we call them handlers. They're handling everything. They're also going to make sure the schedule. So like, for instance, Sweetwater, she made sure I had access to everything I wanted to in the building and everywhere I wanted to go. She made sure I had a coffee. She made sure I had water. And then she also made sure I was there on time for my appointment with the CEO of the company. Since he was spending a lot of time with me, we spent a good chunk of time together. We actually walked the entire warehouse together before we did the podcast. We got to know each other, which was really nice. Okay, so, and I know what you're thinking, they sponsored this. No, I bought the guitar when I came back. I was thinking about it the whole time, and then when I got back, I go, you know what, I'm going to order it. And I was able to get it before my birthday, which was really cool. They don't even know. In fact, if they're watching the podcast now, they're going to find out I bought a guitar when I was there. So I got a Dane Electro 59, and the whole thing about Guitar of the Week for me is about a story, and a real good story, not just hey, I wanted this guitar and I got it. There's actually a crazy story to this, and I think it's okay to start to tell the story now. So the first thing I want to show you is I told you this color is really hard to see, and I want to show you how if I switch cameras, okay, I'm going to switch to the side camera. This is more accurate. They're calling this color baby blue. That's what I would call it. I'm actually going to here, and I'm going to switch to this camera. So if you look here, right, that's what I'm looking at. That would be, cover my face. That would be the more accurate. I think this is the most accurate. See how deep this blue looks? It's not like a light powdery baby blue. Go back here. It's really beautiful color. I mean, it's gorgeous. And in person, none of those cameras, the camera I switched to is like an 8K super crazy camera. Computer is a camera. So, I mean, it gets it the best. Okay, so Shauna saw this and it was like gorgeous. Now, first of all, I got to tell you, it came pretty horrible out of the box. Come on, Sweetwater. 55-point inspection they inspected it. I mean, there was no defects. Action was really high, so I lowered that. The neck had a lot of relief in it. That could have been in shipping, of course, right? The nut, though, is not cut as deep as it needs to be, which is fine because, as I always say that, I'd rather it be cut a little shallow, a little deep. It's aluminum. What's great about this one is these pop off. They have a little screw right there, so I'm going to probably take it off and then file some spots real quick, and then that will help me for lubricating it. And it's on borderline fret sprout. So if I put a sock on it right now, I think it would get a 3.5 out of 5. It's not scratching me, but I can feel they're about to. That's just why I want to, maybe keep it humidified for a couple days and see what happens. Right now I'm at 60% humidity in the room, so this will be fine in here. So Dana Electro 59 NOS. The why this is a funny guitar is, why do I even have this guitar, is if you watch this channel, I've owned a lot of these, and I want to tell you why. Okay, well, let me tell you the story. So Steve at Dana Electro was one of the first people to ever, by the way, Dana Electro also owns Snark. So Steve owns Dana Electro and Snark. Steve at Dana Electro was one of the very first ever companies to reach out to me ever and say, hey, I love what you do. I'd like to send you some products. You don't need to make videos. You don't need to do anything. I just want you to, if you have any thoughts on them, great. If you want to keep them, great. Whatever you want to do is fine. He had one stipulation. You can't sell them, and you can't do a giveaway, like a sponsored giveaway. Basically, let him know if I don't like them. He sent the guitars and some tuners and some stuff. And I went through the guitars, and the guitar that he wanted to promote, you could tell, was this one guitar. I don't even think I did a video of that guitar. And in this, I think there's 3 guitars he sent. There was this red 59 Dana Electro. And I never liked 59 Dana Electros. They would come in the store, I'd work on them. I just always thought it was cardboard junk. Like, it looked dumb to me. I don't know why. I mean, this looks like a beautiful, right? Doesn't it remind you of a Corvette or a Cadillac? But I mean, when you see the black ones, I was like, they always were black, right? With sparkle, and it was just like the silver tones. It's not my thing, right? Obviously, I did the video on the silver tone, done these guitars now. It just wasn't my thing, right? And I just wasn't loving it. And I got it, and I played it, and I kept playing it, and I'm like, I absolutely love this guitar. I love the way it sounds and loves plays. And at the time, back then, I think it was like $399 or $350 for it's made in Korea. I believe these are made in the Mirror factory. So you guys know this is not World. This would be Mirror. I'm pretty sure. And just really good. And here's why. I had to know why. So I reached out to him and I said, why is this guitar better? I hate these guitars. People used to bring them in, and I used to cringe because I knew I was going to play like butt. They always had this weird, like I'm plucking the string. They always had this weird sitar thing. I just hated everything about them. And he said, when I bought the brand and I brought it back to life, I thought the one thing we should do is improve the quality of them. So we went to what I felt was the best factories like Mirror and World, and made them in Korea, and then put higher standards. So these are made differently than their vintage ones. So no one confused the new Dana Electros to the vintage ones. They are not the same bones or structure, okay? These are far superior in the way that they're constructed and built. I mean, just look at the bridge. This is a better bridge than what that, now they still make retro ones because they had people complain because they're not the same. And they don't even care. They're unapologetic. The original ones, they would use masonite, as the pick guard, a piece of, that cardboard wood that they make the body out of. Now they just use a piece of plastic. Why? Because you don't need to use masonite. We did the Silvertone video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch my video, $67 guitar from Sears video, which is about Silvertone. And that's essentially Dana Electro was a builder at the time of those. So he improved them. When you play this guitar, it looks right. It looks like that guitar from Sears, but it plays amazing. It's in tune. Great. Here's the problem though. I don't like red. I love the way it plays and I love the way it sounds, but I don't like red. And when I looked at all the Dana Electros, I was like, they had a copper one. They had all these ones that I thought were just way cooler. So I was in a guitar center one day and I saw a black one. Okay. And they had it on blowout for like $175, $190. It was super cheap. And I actually had a gift card at Guitar Center. So I bought the black one because I go, okay, I'd rather have the black. And I gave the red one away, which was fine. And by the way, I got permission from Dana Electro. They're fine. We didn't do a giveaway. I just gave it to someone. So I gave it away. And then the black one didn't play as good as the red one. It didn't sound the same, but it was really close. I just kept thinking, man, that red one was really special. And that's okay. I was happy until one day, this YouTube channel, who I dearly love, named RJ Rinquillo, did a video. RJ's also good friends with Steve at Dana Electro, and he's a very talented musician. I love RJ. I've sent him some business over the years. Like, here's some companies I think you should work with. And I think he's one of those channels that's a great channel, and then one of the channels is not appreciated at the level I think it needs to be. RJ does a video of this blue sparkle, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm like, wow, that's it. That guitar is gorgeous. It looks like a bass boat at a showroom floor. It's just gorgeous. And I reach out because I go, I could buy it, but I go, hey, I got this buddy. His name's Steve at Tele Electro, and I've done a lot of videos, right? And we have a good relationship. I reached out to Steve at Tele Electro and I said, hey, I'd like to buy a blue Sparkle 59 NOS. And Steve responds back to me and goes, when Phil McKnight wants a guitar, we don't charge him for a guitar. We get him the guitar. It's coming to you, buddy. And I'm like, wow, thank you so much. The day later, he emails me and he goes, Phil, we don't have any more of those guitars. And I said, no problem. He goes, no, wait, Phil. There's a dealer that has one. We're buying it back from the dealer. We're going to get it back here. We're going to check it out, make sure it's fine because it's been on the wall for a little while. And we're going to send it to you. I said, no, you don't need to do that. He goes, we're going to do that, Phil. And they do it. And so, fast forward the time. So I get the guitar in a box, shows up. I open the box. This is a really dark blue. You could barely see sparkles in it as much. And I go, you know what? I'm going to replace the black one with this one. It's better than the black one. And it just, every time I saw it, I thought, man, I wish I would have got one like RJ Rinkelio. So then I went to Germany and I saw RJ Rinkelio. And I walked up to him and I just like when I see other YouTubers, I say, hey, just fan of your channel. He said, thanks, man. Right? We're talking. And I just said to him, I said, hey, you have this beautiful Dane Electro in Sparkle. I loved it so much I had to have it. So after I saw your video, I got one. I said, Steve sent me one. He's like, oh yeah, it's great, right? And I said, yeah. And I go, but yours sparkles so much. And he goes, oh, well, I set the lighting, and then he goes into detail about how he sets his lighting and he color corrects his videos. Because he's not just I don't know if you know this about RJ. He's not just a talented musician and talented studio recording engineer. He's a talented videographer. And as he's telling me this story, which I never told him, so if he ever sees this, this is the first time he's going to know this part of the story. But as he was telling me, I was like a little bit in my chest, sinking in my chest going, oh, that's why mine doesn't look like that. So mine doesn't pop like his does in that video. Like I said, look at the two videos. His just gorgeous. The good part of the story, which is what this guitar is, when Shauna stopped and said, wow, that's gorgeous. And then Madison also said, yeah, that's gorgeous. And I turn around and I go, oh, that's it. It's the guitar I love, but finally in a color that I'm just in love with. And I know this is a lame story, but it's just funny. I think these stories to me are like, this is, I think, who we are as a whole as guitar players. This is the insanity. Sometimes I wonder if some of you guys that watch this podcast or listen to it, you have your spouses with you and stuff, or your girlfriends or your boyfriends or whatever, or your family. And they're like, this guy's nuts. But then they go, but that's you. Like, we're all nuts. Let me get a cable so we can hear this thing. So let's plug it in and play it. One of the things I absolutely love about what they do is I love that they match the knobs to the finish. So on this, the way this works is the top ones are the tone controls and the bottom ones are the volume controls. Three-way switch, but there's something different, which we'll show you in the sounds. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to start with the bridge pickup, and then I'll go to the neck pickup, and then the middle, and I'll explain why when I get there. Let's start with the bridge pickup first. Here's on the clean tone. Okay, let's go to the neck pickup. Now here's why I wanted to go in that order. When you go to the middle pickup, which is both pickups, these are in series. So obviously they're hum canceling, but more importantly, they're like a humbucker. They're twice as powerful. So I want to show you when I go from a single position to the double position, it actually gets bigger, fuller sounding. Here we go. Okay, so some things to know is the neck is a solid wood neck with a rosewood fretboard and 22 nickel silver frets with an aluminium truss rod, nut. The truss rod is a dual action truss rod. I have the cover off because I was making adjustments to it. The body is masonite. So if you watch that video, I explain what masonite is, and it's essentially a full hollow guitar. There's a center block, and then most is hollow, so very light. This guitar is in the 5-pound range. I think when I picked it was like 5 pounds 9 ounces is what I picked off the Sweetwater site. They get as high as about 6.5 pounds maybe, and as low as about 5 pounds even. So very light. So that's one of the appeals of it. Let's just show you one more tone, one more playthrough. I'm going to start with the neck. And actually, no, you know what? I'll do the middle, and then I'm going to roll the tone control off the wrong one. The tone control, no, right one. Tone control off the bridge to show you how that kind of is a good sound that I like. Okay, there we go. There's a little something. So like I said, I love the middle position. That's kind of where I stay with this, and I kind of really like it. I think I adjust the neck right before. I want to check something. Yeah, adjust the neck right before we started the channel, or the show. And it seems to be settling pretty nicely. Like I said, I think it was really nice. I think they ship these with D'Addario strings. Yep, the D'Addario strings. And I stretch them pretty good, but maybe they need a little bit more. So there's your Dane Electro 59 NOS, new old stock. The cardboard guitar. This came from ATX Guitar Dude. It says, hey, I would love for you to review some of the old Blood Noise Endeavors pedals one day. Mini could be a little over the top for you, of course. I'm starting to branch out into some more exotic stuff, thus my interest in the topic. Gassing for the pedals can be just as bad as guitars and amps. Sure, I can look into that stuff and see. You know, it's one of those things, especially like I said with the second channel, where I can just turn on the camera, have some fun, and then somebody edits it up and put it on the second channel. So that's what we'll do. So that works great. He has a follow-up or another part of the question. He says, hey, what do you think of the 2 Notes Reload 2 as compared to the UA aux box? The Reload appears to be more advanced features in addition to preventing loss of high end when attenuating the signal. Do you think in time it will surpass the aux box in popularity? Not the popularity means much to me. He says, by the way, I have the older 2 Notes. So I love this analogy. I'm going to stick with it forever until, these products are obsolete and gone. I think 2 Notes is more like a PC and the aux box is more like a Mac. And the idea that, obviously the aux box is very, very limited in what you can do. And what I mean by that is, it's for you guys that are tech guys are like, what are you talking about? I can do all kinds of stuff. Just take it for the generalized point, which is you generally buy a Mac and it's complete, right? You buy a Mac and it's like a Mac Studio box, or you buy a MacBook and you're like, this is what it is. Where, if you get a gaming computer and stuff, you're upgrading cards and you're building it specifically to your needs. Okay, for the most part. Okay, most people are looking for. Most consumers of Mac products like me are looking for something a little dumbed down. Like turn it on, it does what it's supposed to do, and I don't have to worry as much. I think that's the aux box, right? You turn it on, it's very limited what it does, but what it does really great. Like I said, I say this all the time, it's got a lot of quirkiness to it, like using their own weird power supply. The fact that you have to edit it with Wi-Fi, not Bluetooth, so you have to get out an iPad and then connect to your Wi-Fi and then edit it, and it's kind of weird. But what I can tell you is that once you edit it, set up your aux box, which I did 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I've never done anything to it again. It's just the same way it's saved. And when I've talked to musicians that use it, professionals on tour and stuff, they say the same thing. They're like, yeah, I set it up and I've never really adjusted anything ever again. It just sounds good all the time. The two-note stuff, I think, is far superior in the idea that you can get more precise. You can get more precise. Sorry, no S in there. More precise sounds, and get your own IRs, do all your own stuff. And I think you can make it sound great, maybe even better than the aux box. And it's less expensive. So that's why I like that analogy. It's all the things, right? It's less expensive. It's got more adjustability, and it's just to me superior in those attributes. But I really like the aux box. It's one of those things where knowing that something's better out there doesn't necessarily make me want it. It's like, yeah, I agree. The aux box does kill some of the top end sound of the amps when you run it through. That's fine. It's fine for me. I can make it work. I just like it. It works great, and I've already invested my money and time into it, so that's what I have. But if I was going to, what I can tell you is, if you have a Two Notes product, which, like I said, costs less and technically has more versatility, I don't know why you would specifically want to seek out the aux box. I don't know what would possess you to go, hey, this has way more. I'm going to the aux box, not a better product in my opinion in that way. I just like the simplicity of it. One of the things I like about the aux box is, and the same thing I like about my Kemper, they have something in common. Here's what they have in common. I get a sound that I like, and I just have no inclination to change it. My Kemper that I bought 4 years ago, I'm still running the 3 sounds in it that I set up when I first got it or shortly after I got it. I have not added or changed anything. Okay, that's not true. Okay, see, now I just realized that's not true. A few months ago, which I can't remember when, it could have been in February, I did buy you can buy profiles. I bought a profile pack and I loaded it into my Kemper because I was like, finally, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna get some new sounds. And I played with it for about 2 hours, and then I was just like, yeah. And then I went right back to where I was. So I did try it, but no, I just like it. So same thing with the aux box. I just like it. So that's the only thing. But there's nothing about it that I can say, given the price comparison of the aux box to Two Notes, there's just nothing I could tell you that says spend more money and get the aux box. Nothing. It's not more portable. It's not more durable. It doesn't necessarily sound better. It's just what I have and what I like. And that's it. Feature-wise, I think I like it. One of the things I like about it, like when I got now remember I had the Two Notes Captor X, and one of the things I really liked about the aux box was having 5-way rotary for the attenuation. That was a really, really important thing for me. It's actually everything part of what I need when I'm doing this stuff. Do I tell this story? Do I tell you guys? I think I'll tell you guys. I remember I told this to Glenn Fricker, and I remember his face. Like, he was confused. He was like, what the hell's wrong with you? So let me tell you why I like the aux box. And I think sometimes that is better than specifications, right? Like here I am talking, I'm sure maybe it's confusing. Like, so you like the thing that's more expensive, that has less features, right? And you're like, yeah. And then why? Let me tell you why. When I started on YouTube, I was a guitar tech sharing reviews and tech advice. That was kind of the thought process here on the channel. For some reason, people are like, your lighting sucks. Your camera angle's atrocious. Why is that amp mic that way? You're an idiot. And it didn't upset me, but I was confused. Like, what do you think you're watching here? I'm a dude who works on guitars that just happens to have a Droid phone, right? Like I have a Galaxy phone. I'm filming with a phone. Like, what do you think's happening? I'm not a videographer. I'm not a studio person, right? I'm not any of those things. I've never done those things. I have no idea how those things even work. And that's what YouTube gives people, is it lets people who have no business making content, make content, but they have substance sometimes. I'm not going to say I have substance, but I'm going to say sometimes they have substance, and that's what they bring to the table. They bring energy, or more importantly, information that you wouldn't get from, a professional studio environment, right? So as I learned lighting, as I learned cameras, as I learned stuff, and then also got my own, I want to say my own voice. In other words, figured out what look I like. There's a look I actually go after. And it's very important to me that videos look a certain way when in the vibe of it. I don't want to over polish and produce. And then to me, it looks like a Sweetwater video. It just looks too good. And then it feels like a professional guitar demo. And I don't think that's the vibe, because that's not what I'm actually doing. Right, I'm actually still kind of giving a review, opinion and insight. But anyways, one of the things I used to deal with that drove me nuts was I would mic up my amps, and then somebody would go, "Oh man, you put the microphone too far on the edge of the cone, and that's why it sounds muddy, and I can't stand it. Oh, you put the microphone in the wrong spot. Why is your microphone far away from your amp? Why is your microphone close to your amp?" And I would just adjust things because people were complaining, and I'm like, okay, I'll do this. Why does the amp sound this way? Why does the amp sound this way? Why? What are you doing? Everyone had opinions. Now, here's what's funny. Everybody has a lot of opinions, but the difference, and this is the important part, is that when somebody said, "Phil, why did you turn that way or do that way? That's not how you do it." I'm like, well, I've been doing it for almost 20 years, and it's been working for me, so I'm going to continue this. Their opinion had no value to me. In other words, in changing the way I looked at how I repaired an instrument. I felt confident. I didn't lose any sleep that night. I'm like, somebody disagrees with how I fixed it. That's how I like to do it. That's how it works. Customers like it. I'm doing it. However, I would lose a lot of sleep every night over camera work and recording work, because somebody goes, "Why is your why? Oh, you recorded it bad." Well, remember, I'm not a recording engineer, so they're probably right. And then I go, "Man, I just made a horrible video. That felt pretty bad." So I was trying to learn how to do this. I watched a lot of content like you guys do, and I was learning recording, and I was learning lighting, and I've done all this stuff, read some books. And then one day I came with this idea, and it was really funny. Somebody said, "Why don't you just take like the aux box or the 2 notes and just run a light in?" And I go, the problem is I kind of like to capture the room. I like to capture more of the environment. I don't want to, once you go down that road, you go down the road of like, well, why don't I just like put 4 tracks of it? And why don't I just, polish it up and compress it in the, post? Why don't I just fix it? And I go, I don't want to do that. So I came to this idea one day. When I got the aux box, I plugged in the aux box and I recorded it, and it sounded amazing. I was like, this is great. I go, this is so good. So let me tell you what I do now, which is funny. Every video, I do this same video. If I do this magnetone right now, what's going to happen is I take the magnetone, I run into the aux box, I run the aux box into my interface, and I record the guitar. And that's the recording once, and I go, oh, I like it. If I like it, I like it. One shot, no fixing in post. That's the way I like it. Then what I do is I plug in the microphone and the other microphone, because I have 2, one in the room and one on the cabinet. And then I record it and I A/B them. And then I go, oh man, my mic sounds brighter. So I move the microphone to the outer side of the cone. And I go, oh, now it sounds too woofy. Okay, I adjust. So all I'm doing in every recording is trying to get my real recording to sound as good as the aux box. The aux box is how I actually fixed all my recording. It just became a way I just do things. Like, because my thought process, so was the aux box isn't just IRs, impulse responses, and a room. It's not speakers. It's also some engineer thought this sounded good, right? Somebody who knows way more than I know about making stuff sound good picked these sounds, picked this stuff. So if I try to adjust more to it, I think it's essentially it works. So I've been doing that for years. It definitely has changed the overall sound of the channel. It's made it a lot better. So sometimes I don't have to do it anymore. Luckily for me, if I'm using the same amp and the same mics and the same stuff all the time, I just go with it. But a lot of times if I'm trying something new, I do that all the time. So I'll take the aux box and I kind of set the standard. This is through my monitors right here. I listen through the monitors. I listen through and I go, that's what I like. Sounds great. Now let's try to get a real version of that. So, that's it. Also lets me learn a lot about when a company's cabinets aren't very good, because, man, sometimes I mic up a cabinet and I just can never get that cabinet to sound as good as the aux box cabinet. And then I just know, like, this is what I'm dealing with. Steven says, hey, I was watching a tour of Ernie Ball Music Man Factory, and they said they only use single action truss rods. What is the benefit as to opposed to a double action truss rod? Is it just cost savings? I'd have to know two things. One, when was that factory tour recorded? The problem with all of this information, the problem with the internet is that when you state something from the past, it might not be the truth anymore because it's not, things change. My understanding is that they use dual action truss rods. I can tell you that some of my Music Mans are dual action truss rods. Originally, the spoke wheel truss rod was a single action truss rod. So it is possible, it's possible they are using single action truss rods in some guitars. And that could have been just misstated, or they could have been referring to maybe only one type of instrument there. But it also could have been a time thing where now, originally when the spoke wheel truss rod came out, one of the issues was how it works is it only tightened, right? So you turned it one way and it just tightened. But like for instance now, so here's what a spoke wheel truss rod looks like. This is what Music Man typically uses, this style of truss rod, so they can flex in both directions. Originally, they did not have a lot of these. I don't remember the very first ones having. Does it let me make that bigger? Wow, gee, thanks a lot. Don't forget, 10% off. The thing comes up every time. Up bow and back bow. So even though the original spoke wheel truss rods were single action, Music Man has dual action truss rods. So I will confirm that when I go to their factory. I'm going to their factory in a couple months. So I will confirm that when I go. Al says, hey, Phil, would love to hear your thoughts about Kramer's. I feel like they were everywhere when I was growing up, and I have a soft spot for them, and it feels like I don't hear much about them anymore. That's because Kramer is the bastard stepchild of Gibson now. Fender has definitely gotten better over the years with Jackson, Charvel, for sure. But there was a time when they were the same thing. What happens is Fender buys Charvel Jackson, like 2001, and then there's really no love for the brand at that point. No one's really trying to advance the brand or do something with the brand. They're really just milking the old designs, and then it just becomes a race to how affordable you can get the old designs to people, right? So you buy an IP that's, you buy this look. That's essentially what Fender's after. They buy a look, okay, the 80s metal look, and then it's how cheap can I get this to the people? Because obviously we can source this anywhere in the world. Over time, they decided, to build the brands, right? That's how it kind of works. And they're not by the way, this isn't picking on Fender. PRS was like that with SE. They built an SE line, and then over time they decided, hey, let's turn this into something. By the way, Fender did it to Squier. Gibson did it to Epiphone, right? There was a time where they just didn't care about those brands. Their IP that mattered was Fender. The IP that mattered was Gibson. Gibson, has Steinberger and has, Kramer. Why there's no American-made Kramer guitars, that they can build out of the Gibson factory? It's because to them, at the end of the day, and I'm guessing, because they haven't told me this officially, there's no Kramer guitar that's as valuable as a Gibson guitar. That's just the reality of that. There's no, if you own those two brands and you cared about, money because you're in business, you're like, I can make a product today. I can make a Gibson Les Paul that I have on back order, 10 months, 2 years deep, or I can make this Kramer, and they're not going to do it. So what do? Well, they go, we'll make import Kramers, right? And they have somebody run that. And And you got to understand, there's a problem on every level. You got to go to the next level, right? So here's the next level. You got a dealer, okay? And the dealers, take Sweetwater Guitars out of the equation, right? Take the big guys out of the equation. You have all the other dealers. You have the other dealers, and they want Gibsons, right? So it's easy enough. But more importantly, they all have credit lines, these dealers. They don't have so much money, just like all of us. There's only so much money to go around. So if you were that brand, if you were Gibson and you're sending your rep to a store and you're like, hey, I need you to sell them, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 worth of guitars, $10,000 worth of guitars, whatever it is your number is, you're going to push those Gibsons, right? And then if they're like, hey, I like to take 10 Kramers, you're like, and think about this. If you're a rep, see, and the system gets kind of broken. And I've dealt with this many times as a dealer, where the rep knows that if I pick, let's use Fender as an example. So I'm a Fender custom shop dealer and I'm a Fender Jackson custom shop dealer. And the rep knows that if I order 6 Jackson custom shops, it's going to take 2 years before I get those in my store. But if I order 6 Fender custom shops, I get them in 12 months. What do you think he wants to sell me? right? He wants to sell me the thing that, well, first of all, he wants to sell me anything I want to buy because he wants to set me sales. But if he can control the narrative, he's going to kind of, inch me towards getting the guitars that I get faster, because that means I can get then more guitars and then more guitars, right? So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. The reality is that no one really, Kramer is not owned by anyone who really is passionate about it. You can talk about, I think Al John still runs it, I guess. I don't know. I haven't seen much of him anymore. But he was used to be pretty more active, I think, in the social media range. But and I think he really was passionate about the brand. But in my experience, he had almost no control, and that's what you deal with. I tell you all the time, one of my biggest frustrations with dealing with companies, that's why big companies are really suck, is I deal with people who have no authority to make any decisions. I make all decisions, right? If I want to do tomorrow, if I'm supposed to have a video come out tomorrow, but I change my mind and I want to do a different video, I just do it. No one is stopping me. No one. Not Shauna, no one. No one cares. They're just like, whatever, do your thing. That's the benefit of having a small little business. I make the decisions on myself. I just did something crazy, so and I, which is, we were making so many Blackstock pickups and we're getting so backlogged. I actually stopped production of the Blackstock pickups. We're I don't want to say retooling, rethinking our process and how we're going to do this. Thousands of dollars of loss, thousands of dollars. And in the same year that I'm also focused on, hiring a full-time person and, building out the new studio and stuff, all the cameras and stuff. But I want to do this. I think it's the right decision. I don't have a board of directors. I don't have a meeting. I don't have a boss. This is what I want to do, and we're doing it. So I think that's the problem. I bet you whoever runs Kramer now would love for Kramer to be better than it is. And they're not going to say, oh, no, it's not great. They're going to say, oh, no, it's great right now. Because what would you say? You would say, oh, yeah, it could be great if my bosses weren't assholes. It's a brand that it's atrophying off. I think Kramer and it's hard to judge them fully because I think BC Rich is atrophying off as well. There's a bunch of these 80s brands that are just atrophying off because they haven't figured out what really matters, what really is the market, right? They only know two markets, and it's because it's the two easiest markets. People who want to buy a custom shop and people who want to buy the inexpensive version of it. But the reality is that we know that the really good guitars sit in that middle space, and that's where a lot of customers are. And that's where a lot of the meat is. Yeah, Al says BC Rich would do a lot better if their prices weren't stupid. I agree. There's a lot of focus on where the guitars are made. I don't think that's going to matter anymore. I think it's about, to me, BC Rich for a time in the early 2000s were making fantastic guitars, essentially out of the world factory, just like Schecter. They were Schecters shaped like BC Riches. Old school BC Rich lovers did not love this because they wanted the American icon BC Rich guitars. But what they didn't understand was they were getting a guitar that was super quality, that looked the part, that had cool finishes, that was sub $1,000. It was a fantastic instrument. Fantastic instruments. I know because finding them on the internet is hard. It's hard. People who have them love them. Korean-made BC Riches, like Korean-made Epiphones, they're highly collectible because the quality was there and the price points were there. It was like everything was great. BC Rich moved on because BC Rich, again, everything becomes a focus of either got to move units or dollars, and you can't just be happy with the success of just making a great guitar or a good guitar at a good price. Like there's just no love and passion in that. It has to be, either ego driven, which is like, hey, look at this crazy $7,000 guitar, or it has to be money driven, which is this, look at this, $99 guitar I made in a junk factory somewhere. And I think that's where a lot of those companies failed. We'll just pick on my channel. Go through the guitars I reviewed in the last 2 years and look at these Sire guitars. Look at these mid-tier price, quality instruments. Just amazing. You're telling me that Sire can deliver, right, this quality guitar at $800 that people love, that is built really well, and they can't make a BC Rich or a Kramer exactly like that for the same. Now, I don't want to say I don't like these mid-tier Kramers. They're fine. But nothing's really prompted me to buy one. I think the problem for me is that one of the things that Kramer lacks for me is variety. when they do make a model, there's a couple models that I absolutely love, and I was looking at them. I was like, oh, these are great guitars. I just wish it came in a different color or a different way. And I'm sure they get that a lot, but if you look, a lot of companies like Schecter have no problem. I don't think there's a color or a choice or a model of Schecter somebody can't be somewhat happy with. Okay, so let's pull it up. So looking at Sweetwater, Schecter, which is a fraction of the size of Gibson, has 337 electric guitars listed in the category of solid guitars. Kramer has 76. So look at the massive difference of variety of a brand like Schecter versus Kramer. Also, just like I said, I think what's going to end up happening to the 80s genre of guitars is it'll just go to the collectible market. So it'll all be about buying an expensive one for some reason, which is fine. And like I said, you could I could go on tirades for all kinds of brands and why I think they should be addressing different things. But there's more to it than just we want it. Like I told you, there's the dealers, there's the sales reps, there's economies in play. There's all kinds of things that factor into all those decisions. So I'm just only pitching. I'm only bitching about the one thing. But yeah, like you, I would like to see more Kramers and better series of Kramers. How about this? Could you imagine? Just let me give you an example. Like, could you imagine if Vola could get a licensing deal to just rebrand as Kramer and put a Kramer headstock on that particular guitar? They'd have to change a couple of the specifications because their necks are still the wrong neck profiles, in my opinion. But $1,000 made in Japan Kramer. I mean, the biggest problem is the backlog they're going to have to deal with. That's what I said. Isn't that funny? Like, Vola has to give their guitars away because they have no value. Because everybody's like, oh, it's a made in Japan guitar. It's really good quality. But no one wants a Vola, right? And so that's why they had to go for this. They pulled it from the dealer market. They went direct to sales. They dropped the prices. They're just everything they can to get the price super down. And could you imagine if it was rebranded Kramer? It would be, like I said, a $1,200 Kramer, right? Made in Japan, still fantastic, right? Would be fantastic because it'd be exciting. Yeah, it wouldn't be the American Kramer you dreamed of as a kid, but here's the funny part: they really didn't make any American Kramers, right? Isn't that what's been implied in multiple videos now? Is that even the ones that say made in the USA Kramers are kind of sketch now? And if you're really into Kramer, I guess you know more about it than I do because I haven't done a deep research into it, but the takeaway I'm getting is that there was very few actual American Kramers being made. And the good ones a lot of them were Japanese parts. Elroy says, hey, since this is your traveling year, how about a portable guitar rig that also focuses on the guitars themselves? I have that video that will go on the second channel probably in a week to 2 weeks. And then Jonathan says, hey, Phil, I hope you and your family are doing well. Thank you for that. Says, I was thinking about doing a guitar build similar to the one you did recently. Yeah, you're talking about for the clinics. I was going to use a blowtorch to burn the guitar and highlight the grain, and then was going to use penetrating guitar oil to finish the body. Do you think I need to clear coat the oil finish? You do not. I did the beer caster. That's how I did it. If you want to watch that video, if you haven't seen it, where I took a torch to a guitar, and I did not clear coat it. You don't have to clear coat it. And then Christian wants to know, Christian says the question about consignments. And then we'll hit that last one. It says, hey, Phil, have all the guitars you listed on consignment sold yet? How long on average does it take to sell them for you? So you're talking about when I took them to the store and consigned them? No. So what happens is I took some guitars and some amps and stuff to a store and consigned it out. I think they sold about 70% of it is what I saw. Because he cut me a check for about 70% of it. So it takes a while. How long did it take? That took about a month. And then it'll probably take about 2-3 months to sell the rest of it. That's just how that goes. The desirable pieces will go first. Is my best recommendation when you're getting rid of a lot of gear is get rid of the least desirable product first. It's the smartest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do. So you just get that out of the way. Somebody always wants to buy your Fender Strat, your Gibson Les Paul, your, whatever your Ibanez, your, whatever, your Heritage. Somebody always wants to buy the stuff that people want. It's really hard to sell some of the off brands or the stuff that's less desirable. And so that's why you always kind of push that first. The reason I tell you that is because what ends up always happening if you don't is you sell your good pieces and then you're sitting with your pieces that you don't love as much and they're not as great. And then you either keep those pieces, which sucks because now you've got rid of your good pieces, or you end up blowing that stuff out because it's a nuisance at this point, right? And I find that if you spend more time focusing on getting rid of the less desirable pieces. So that's just the rule I follow. I had very good success selling everything on the gear exchange program, with Sweetwater. Of course, keep in mind, I have the advantage on a Friday show to say, hey, check out what I'm selling, and you guys can click on it. Plus, because we came up with the idea to basically have Sweetwater sponsor it, I thought the prices were very good, so because I wasn't really super focused on overhead cost. So when I say Sweetwater sponsored it, just keep in mind they paid for the overhead. They paid me enough to cover the boxes, the tape, the bubble wrap, the silly costs, right? Paper, all that stuff. And essentially the shipping is what I factored out. We sold 10 guitars. So if I figured each guitar cost me about $60 to ship, and then you figure in the boxes and the shipping, I think Sweetwater covered about 90% of all that. And so that's how I was able to pass on a savings to you guys, because I was like, oh, cool, right? Which has made it easier for me to sell the stuff. See, that's the advantage I got, is that I kind of wanted everything to go. So it was I thought it was a win-win. Everybody win. Somebody gets a good deal. We get guitars of the week. Sweetwater gets you guys to know about their gear exchange. And also, I learned I like gear exchange. So Al says, hey, so are you going to be selling more stuff? Yes, I just need a break. And because, every week it was like I do the show, and then that Saturday, Saturdays usually for me are some bonus content and stuff for the patrons. And then I some stuff I got to zip up from the week. And now we're shipping guitars. So it was just a lot more stuff to do. Yes, we will be doing more selling off the gear kind of stuff, because I still have a lot to sell off. It's a lot. Yeah, but it'll be through Gear Exchange. I've decided I just like Gear Exchange. Will I use Reverb again? Absolutely. Reverb's the biggest, and it's the best in the way it overall operates. But in my world, Gear Exchange there was a lot of benefits. And the thing that sold me, and this is how we'll end this show, when I was sitting in the van, Here's the story. I was sitting in the van with the CEO of Sweetwater. We're sitting in this, because they have, the campus is so big at Sweetwater, you need a golf cart to get from one like giant building to the next giant building. So of course there was a few of us. There was like 4 or 5 of us. So they put us in a nice van. So they had this van pick us up. I sat with Mike in the back, and we were talking, and I was telling him about my experience with Gear Exchange and what I liked and didn't like. And he said something to me that just really made it make sense. He focused in what I was explaining to him. I said, Gear Exchange doesn't sell as fast as Reverb. Gear Exchange, doesn't have the customer resources that Reverb has, which is why it's not selling as fast. Gear Exchange doesn't have all the gear that Reverb has. It's just not what Reverb is. I said, but I really enjoyed everyone I sold a guitar to or bought a guitar from. I said, I just really enjoyed the interactions. It was more casual and less like, you're going to include this, right? Or, there was less like this, who's going to take advantage of who's kind of vibe. I said, it kind of reminded me of the old days of buying and selling online when you weren't freaked out that somebody was always going to try to con you. He said, one, the reason why there's not so much gear on Gear Exchange was, one, it's not as big yet, but also all the reasonable price gear sells really fast. Our data shows it. If you put your stuff on Gear Exchange at a reasonable price, it moves fast. So we are seeing the churn happening. The second thing he said was, he thinks the reason I have a positive experience with Sweetwater customers, the Gear Exchange customers, is because every single person on Gear Exchange is a Sweetwater customer with a Sweetwater account. They're tied into the same. And I was like, okay. I thought he was pitching like and Sweetwater customers are the best. I think his point was good. I'll stick with my point. It's a small community. Small communities tend to be better. The bigger the community, the bigger the amount of jerks get in it. So that's why I like it right now. But it is harder to sell on there than Reverb. That's why I said, do yourself a favor. List them both places. It'll be cheaper on Gear Exchange on average for shipping. And I think you'll have a better experience on it overall. But in all honesty, I think 8 out of 10 times, if you list gear on both sites, you're probably going to sell on Reverb way before you sell on Gear Exchange. So, but those 2 times you sell on Gear Exchange, I think you'll have a better experience. So, all right. On that note, I want to thank everybody for hanging out. I hope everybody had a good time. And thank you guys for your time, and know your gear.
The Know Your Gear podcast. The Know Your Gear podcast is brought to you by Patreon members, channel members, and viewers who like and subscribe. Thank you for making this possible.